Hey everyone! Happy to be back again with more fun gaming videos for you all to enjoy. I am willing to bet that less people will have actually heard of this next title, and that's okay. Time can sometimes do that to us. The important thing is, you're here with me now to talk all about it. So what the heck is Dangerous Dave? And more importantly, why is it even relevant? First, I'll start by talking briefly about the original game that started it all, and work my way up to the entry considered to be by far the best in the series, Dangerous Dave and the Haunted Mansion. So, without further ado, let's not waste any more time, strap in, and see just what the big deal is. In 1988, John Romero, now of Doom and Wolfenstein fame, was doing a mix of jobs, ranging from porting over some games to various platforms, to developing his own games on the side. For his latest personal project, he had one goal in mind: to successfully make a game in the style of Super Mario Bros., but for computers. And the influence wasn't too hard to spot. Dangerous Dave, also known as Dangerous Dave and the Deserted Pirate's Hideout, was first released for the Apple II through a disc magazine known as Uptime. The game received numerous ports with their own level of tweaks and small additions. While the gameplay isn't exactly like Super Mario, as I'm pretty sure Mario never carried a firearm or a jetpack before, I wish, plenty of similarities can still be spotted. The most obvious being special warp zones hidden at the top of certain stages, only requiring you to walk to the edge of the screen to enter. While these would not advance you to later stages, they would provide you with more ways to grab items and in turn extra lives if necessary. The version I'm showcasing here is from a 1991 re-release of the game called Double Dangerous Dave, featuring a 16-color mode, which gave the game far more visual flair than the previous versions. The player is given 3 lives to grab a chalice, to reach the end of 10 stages, occasionally being presented with a jetpack or a gun to fend off enemies, some of which are easily capable of shooting back. If the player loses a life, they can gain it back at every interval of 20,000 points, but there also lies its greatest flaw. If you have a full set of lives at said interval, you can't gain an additional life when it comes up. If you happen to lose one right after that interval, tough luck, maybe when you reach 40,000. It doesn't help that the game also gets excruciatingly hard in the final stages. I actually found level 9 to be by far the most frustrating. In this stage, you're given a set of pink platforms to walk on. Or are you? Yes, certain parts of the floor are not actually there, and there's no way to tell without walking over it and falling to your doom. Oh, and did I mention you have to start over from the beginning every time you run out of lives? That said, I did eventually manage to come out the victor and face the challenging, but fun, final stage. I recommend this title only to those who are interested in Dave's place in video game history, as gamers of today will likely find this to be far too frustrating or quote-unquote archaic in its design now. Still, I couldn't help but feel an appreciation for it. This title kicked off so much more than any of us, including Romero, could have ever dreamed of. Now let's flash forward to 1990, 2 years later. Romero began work for a company called SoftDisk. Here, he would go on to team up with his new partner in programming, John Carmack, also now famous for Doom, Wolfenstein, etc. They would have to produce games every 2 months for a disc magazine called Gamer's Edge, but that didn't stop them from experimenting in some other fascinating ways. Now, if you've seen my Commander Keen videos before, you may recall me talking about the concept of adaptive tile refresh, a programming technique created by John Carmack used to help backgrounds in a game move along smoothly with the character on screen. While Keen was one of the first titles to take proper advantage of the technology, it was not, in fact, the first game to use it. You see, late one night, John Carmack decided to test out this newly developed engine alongside partner Tom Hall, also now famous for, you guessed it, Doom and Wolfenstein, on something more specific. Super Mario Bros. 3 to be exact. Within the course of a night, they had recreated the entire first stage of the game, using Dave as a placeholder for the Italian plumber himself, and hilariously calling this prototype Dangerous Dave in Copyright Infringement. Romero knew right away that they were onto something special, and worked with his team to create a Super Mario Bros. 3 demo for Nintendo, as shown by the footage here. Nintendo ended up rejecting the offer, stating they would rather keep their games on their own personal hardware, but admitted that they were quite impressed by what they saw. This rejection would lead to the development of Commander Keen, and basically id Software itself. You see? Dave's more important than you realized, huh? But wait! There's more! In 1991, Dangerous Dave got its first true sequel in the name of Dangerous Dave and the Haunted Mansion. Unlike the original Dave, John Romero had his newly assembled team of id Software to help create it for the Gamer's Edge magazine. And what a project it was! John Carmack had used the engine from their earlier work, Shadow Knights, and upgraded it to fit this new format. We would also see the latest in Carmack's use of adaptive tile refresh, making the background movement smoother than ever. It would feature Dave, now armed with a shotgun, raiding a haunted mansion in search of his brother Delbert. Everything about this title is so different from the previous entry, you'd be forgiven for not even recognizing it. Dave can now fire his shotgun in 8 different directions, all of which now give him a slight recoil. Although his ammo is infinite, his use of it is not. When Dave fires too many bullets at once, he has to stand in place in order to reload them. This makes your use of ammo a lot more strategic, as the last thing you want to do is get caught by an enemy right after you've gotten done firing your last shot. The game also has plenty of doors for you to open. Some of them contain hidden items inside, while others contain secret doors to other locations. There's also plenty of other secret rooms throughout the game, including this one right in the very beginning. While we may have moved on from the warp zone idea, it clearly evolved into something much more unique here. If you were to ask other players what stuck with them the most about this game, it would likely be the death animations. Yes, there are so many different enemy types and objects in your path that it's quite easy to trigger these little sequences, and they're all surprisingly crafty. It took what could have been one of the game's most frustrating aspects and actually made it quite fun to experience. Both the middle and the end stages of the game revolve around boss fights, the first with a giant Frankenstein-like monster, and the other a giant floating head shaped like a skull, or something out of Terminator, I'm not sure which. While neither one is what I'd call impossible, their patterns do still take a bit of work to memorize, especially when you can die from just one hit. Planning out when to stop to reload and when to jump and dodge attacks is a must. Haunted Mansion is still quite difficult, at least by today's gaming standards, but it's also far more forgiving than its predecessor. Being this is an early 90s DOS game, there is no save system to speak of here. The player is given 3 lives to start with, but can easily get more by collecting enough points, I believe about 16,000 or so, whether through blasting some enemies or collecting various items scattered throughout most of the 8 stages. There's also the occasional 1-up hiding around. The game will give you some frustrating deaths, usually due to your field of vision and not always knowing what's going to pop up around every corner. It also has a very interesting design choice that I can't really decide if I love or despise. You see, if you run out of lives and hit the game over screen, Dave will not force you to restart from the beginning of the game, assuming you got past the first 2 stages at least, but will ask if you want to restart the game from the previous stage you were in. For example, say I were to reach game over at the boss fight in stage 4, which I did the first time. The game would then ask me if I wanted to start again from stage 3. On one hand, this annoyed me greatly because it would mean having to replay the same stage I already worked hard to get through. On the other hand, this would technically allow me to go back and get plenty of extra lives now that I knew all the ins and outs of the previous stage, and was far less likely to lose any more lives in the process. It was also far, far better than having to start from the beginning, so I found it fine enough in that regard. Stage 7 is a real test of your patience. Not only is the platforming tougher, but you now have to deal with every type of enemy the game's thrown at you up to this point. The goblins with their throwing knives and spiders trying to catch you from above were already bad enough, but the unkillable flaming skulls and the large amount of wolves with their hectic attack patterns really brought this stage to another level. I couldn't help but feel like I was playing a precursor to Doom itself with this one. While we're on the topic, did anything from this game inspire Doom or Wolfenstein? It's hard to say, though I wouldn't be surprised if the shotgun and flaming skull heads had some sort of an impact. If there's one thing I can say, it's that the atmosphere in this game, particularly in the later stages, reminded me of the way I felt when I first picked up Doom and Doom 2 back in the day. Whether intentionally or not, I do not believe that to be a coincidence. After defeating the final boss, Delbert is freed and the game ends. Even after completing the game, I felt the temptation to go back and retry some stages that I felt I'd have better luck with after learning the level structure better. The game was just that fun. Honestly, it's hard to believe that such a game could be completed in the 2-month window that id Software's creative team had, and yet, here it is. While I still have a hard time recommending the original to anyone beyond the most die-hard of fans and gamers interested in Dave's history, I have no hesitation in recommending its superior sequel. This is everything I could have wanted in a classic MS-DOS title, to the point where I now desperately want someone to remake it for today's audiences. Even with its slight flaws and unfair difficulty in places, this game holds up surprisingly well and deserves to be discovered by more people. While Dangerous Dave as a series would continue, John Romero's involvement in the title would not. 2 more games would be put out by Softdisk: Dangerous Dave's Risky Rescue and Dave Goes Nuts. While these 2 did borrow elements from the previous games, they were considered vastly inferior to Haunted Mansion, and rarely come up in discussion. But hey, if you're curious enough, Good Old Gaming, that's GOG.com, has a pack of all these titles sold together anyway, so you could see just what I'm talking about for yourself. These days, when we talk about gaming history, we all have general ideas about the course and directions that the industry has taken over the years, but with so much having occurred over all those literal decades, it's so easy to miss important details at the same time. I mean, what would have happened if Nintendo had accepted the Super Mario Bros. 3 prototype? Would we have seen more NES ports on the platform? Would we be playing games like Zelda Breath of the Wild on our PCs officially right now? I mean, who knows, really? But, you know, it's fun to think about all the same. And that's going to do it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and let me know your thoughts on Dangerous Dave's legacy in the comments below. And until next time,